My name is Clara Renfield. I am 31 years old. I have a small apartment in Portland with 2 houseplants I have kept alive for 4 years, a job I earned on my own, and a scar just below my left collarbone from a surgery I paid for myself. My life, by most measures, is quiet, intentional, mine. And then, 8 months ago, I sat at a dining room table I hadn't sat at in 6 years, across from my parents and my brother, and they told me, with straight faces, that the $200,000 my grandmother left me when she died had already been given to Marcus. All of it. Gone. Done. What I didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my grandmother had anticipated this moment with surgical precision. She had left me something else, something they couldn't redirect, couldn't redistribute, couldn't touch. One letter, sealed, addressed to me in her handwriting. And that letter was about to burn the whole story down. If you've ever felt like the invisible child, the one who did everything right and still came home empty-handed, hit that like button and subscribe to Hidden Life Files. We tell real stories here. Drop a comment and tell me, where in the world are you watching this and what time is it? I want to know who's up at 2 a.m. with me. Now, let me take you back to where this started, long before that dining room table, long before the letter. Back to when the pattern was just beginning and I was too young to see it. My parents, Robert and Diane Renfield, were not cruel people. That is the first thing I need you to understand, because this story is not about monsters. It's about something quieter and harder to name. It's about the way love can be distributed unevenly in a household, the way one child can become the sun a family orbits, while the other learns to live like a planet on the edge of the solar system, cold but self-sufficient. Marcus is 4 years older than me. He is the kind of man who fills a room without trying. Loud laugh, wide gestures, a talent for making our father lean forward whenever he talks. Growing up, he was the story our parents told at dinner parties. Marcus made varsity. Marcus got the lead. Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. My mother has a specific way of saying his name, a half-second longer than any other word in her sentence. I noticed it when I was 9. I never mentioned it. I was the one who cooked dinner on Thursday nights because our mother worked late. I was the one who learned to fix the bathroom faucet from a YouTube video because we couldn't afford the plumber that month. Not because anyone asked me to, but because someone had to, and I had learned early that waiting to be asked was a strategy that didn't pay out in this house. There was one moment, small and specific, that I always come back to. I was 12, I had won a regional science competition. 3rd place, which felt enormous to me at the time. My teacher had put a blue ribbon in my hand and said, "You have a real mind, Clara." I carried that ribbon home like it was made of glass. I set it on the kitchen counter while I made dinner, hoping someone would see it. Marcus came home first. He picked it up, turned it over, set it back down without a word, then opened the refrigerator. The ribbon was still on the counter 2 days later. I threw it away myself. That was not a tragedy. That was a Tuesday, but it was also the blueprint for everything that came later. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was named Eloisa. She died 3 years ago at 82, and she was, without exaggeration, the only person in my family who looked at me like I was already enough. She had small hands, always cold, and when she held yours, she held them with both of hers. She smelled like cedar and hand lotion. She used to say, "Clara, you are the kind of person people don't understand until they need you." I thought it was a compliment. I didn't realize it was also a warning. She had money, not obscene wealth, but real money. A house she sold in 2019, savings from decades of careful living. She had 2 grandchildren, and she had told my mother, plainly and in writing, that her estate was to be divided equally. 100,000 to Marcus, 100,000 to me. She died in April. The money, I was told, had been placed in a family account temporarily while the estate settled. I was living in Portland by then, focused on my nursing residency. I didn't push. I trusted the process. I trusted my parents. That was my blind spot. Not weakness, not stupidity, just the particular blindness of someone who had never once been stolen from by the people who were supposed to love them. It was a Sunday in October. The microwave clock read 3:17 p.m. My parents had asked me to come home for the weekend, something about updating legal paperwork from the estate, some loose end that needed a signature. I had driven 4 hours. I sat down at the kitchen table where I had eaten 1,000 meals, and my mother set a cup of tea in front of me that I didn't ask for, and I remember thinking that was strange. She only makes tea for people she's about to disappoint. My father sat across from me. Marcus was there too, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, one ankle resting on his knee. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the window. My father slid a single sheet of paper toward me. I looked down. It was a summary from the estate attorney. The column next to my name showed a 0. I looked up. "We made a decision as a family," my father said. "Marcus has the business opportunity. The timing was right. He needed the capital, and you were—" He paused, chose a word carefully. "Stable." Stable. He used the word like it was a consolation prize. I felt it first in my chest. Not pain, pressure, like something calcifying in real time. My hands were flat on the table, and I remember being aware of the table's texture under my palms, the old wood grain, slightly uneven from years of use. "You gave him my inheritance," I said, not a question. "We redirected it," my mother said softly, and she reached forward like she was going to touch my hand. I moved my hand. Marcus finally looked at me. He didn't say he was sorry. He said, "You're going to be fine, Clara. You always are." There it was, the sentence that would live in me for months like a splinter. Not cruelty, something almost worse. The complete and comfortable certainty that I would absorb this, the way I had absorbed everything else, and they could all go on as before. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I left the tea untouched. I drove 40 minutes before I pulled over. Not to cry. I sat in a gas station parking lot, and I thought, with absolute clarity, I am done performing forgiveness for things I was never actually asked to forgive. That was my first choice. Not revenge, just no more. I tried the reasonable things first, because I am a reasonable person. I sent 2 emails to the estate attorney. I made 14 calls over 3 weeks, to my father, to my mother, twice to Marcus. I wrote 1 letter, handwritten, laying out my case calmly. This was my grandmother's stated and documented wish. This was my money. I was asking for acknowledgement, if not restitution. My father called back once. He said the decision was made. He said Grandma would have understood. I thought about asking him when exactly he'd become fluent in the language of a woman who had been dead for 3 years. I didn't. My mother texted, "We love you. Please don't let this damage the family." The family. As though the family were a structure I was threatening to damage from the outside, not one I had already been pushed out of from within. The lowest point came on a Wednesday in November. I was sitting on my apartment floor. Not dramatically, I had just sat down to eat and ended up staying there, and I looked around at the life I had built. The plants, the nursing certificates framed on the wall, the small things I had earned with no safety net, no backstop, no "you're always welcome to come home." And for the first time, I let myself feel how tired I was of being the proof that people in my family didn't need to worry about me. I called my friend Dara. She is a social worker, and she has the specific quality of letting silence exist on a phone call without needing to fill it. I didn't say much. I said, I don't know how to stop being angry without pretending it didn't happen. She said, then stop choosing between those two things. That was the turning point. 7 words from a woman sitting in her own kitchen in Seattle eating cereal at 9 o'clock at night. She wasn't trying to fix me, she was just telling me the options I'd been given were false. I stopped calling my family. I stopped drafting emails. I started looking into what legal options, if any, existed, and I went back to work. 18 months passed. I completed my residency. I accepted a position in a pediatric unit at a hospital in Portland, the job I had been working toward for 4 years. I was good at it. Parents of sick children, I learned, need someone who is calm in exact proportion to their fear. That turned out to be something I had been training for my whole life without knowing it. Dara flew down twice that year. My colleague and friend Nate, who had a habit of leaving coffee on my desk on difficult shifts and never mentioning it, became one of the steadiest people in my life. These were my people now, small in number, reliable in the way that mattered. I didn't speak to my parents. Marcus texted once on my birthday, a gif of balloons. I did not respond. I filed a formal inquiry with the estate attorney about the original distribution documentation, not as a lawsuit, not yet, but as a question with legal weight behind it. What I found in the paperwork that came back was something I hadn't expected. There was a second document, not the will, a personal letter attached to the estate file, marked for my attention, apparently overlooked in the original disbursement of materials. My grandmother's handwriting, sealed envelope. I held it for a full day before I opened it. Before I tell you what was in that letter and what it meant for everything, I need to know where your head is. What do you think Grandma Eloisa wrote? Option A, she knew what my parents would do and planned for it legally. Option B, it was just a goodbye letter. Sentimental, no real power. Drop your answer in the comments right now, because one of you is about to be very right, and it changes everything. My grandmother had written the letter 6 months before she died. The late afternoon light came through my apartment window at a low angle while I read it, and the room smelled like the rain that had been falling all morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table, still in my scrubs. She began with, "Clara, if you are reading this, it means the other document was read first, and this one was set aside. That is what I expected." She had known. She had known my parents well enough, loved them clearly enough, and seen the pattern long enough to understand that her expressed wishes would be filtered through their priorities. So she had done something additional. She had, 6 months before she passed, quietly transferred $200,000 into a separate account, a trust, structured and sealed, with an attorney in a different city, not the family attorney, her own, one I had never met. The trust had one beneficiary, my name. The letter also contained something else, a handwritten account of a conversation she had with my mother 2 years before she died. My mother had, apparently, asked my grandmother to reconsider, to give Marcus the larger share because of his potential. My grandmother had refused. My mother had said, "Clara will be fine. She doesn't need it the same way." My grandmother had written down the date, the place, and the exact words. She had created a record, because she had known that without one, there would be nothing to hold. I made one phone call that afternoon, to the attorney. His name was Gerald Foote, and he had a calm, precise voice that reminded me of someone who had spent decades watching people be surprised by truth. He confirmed everything. The trust had been sitting, properly filed, for 3 years. He had made multiple attempts to reach the family. The contact information on file had been for my mother. She had not responded. I asked him one question. He answered it. I drove home to my parents' house for the first time in 18 months. It was a Saturday evening. My parents were having dinner with Marcus and his girlfriend, a small family dinner, the kind that used to include me. I had called ahead and told them I was coming. My mother had said, "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetheart," in the voice she uses when she is pleased and nervous simultaneously. I walked in through the front door. The dining room had warm light, the table set with the good placemats. Marcus was pouring wine. He looked up and smiled, the easy, unguarded smile of someone who has not been thinking about you at all. I sat down at the table. I did not take off my coat. My father started to say something about the drive, about the weather, the small conversational machinery that families use to avoid the actual conversation. I placed Gerald Foote's letter on the table. "Grandma left me a separate trust," I said, $200,000, structured independently. It's been sitting for 3 years because her correspondence was being filtered through an address that wasn't mine. Silence. The specific kind. Not surprised silence, but caught silence. My mother's face did something complicated. "She also documented a conversation she had with you," I said, looking at my mother, "in which you suggested her wishes be restructured. She wrote it down. Date, location, your exact words." Marcus set the wine bottle down. "Clara," my father started. "I'm not asking for an explanation," I said. My voice was steady. This was important to me, not because I was performing composure, but because I genuinely was not angry anymore. I was something quieter than angry. I was simply done being managed. "I'm telling you what's true, so that everyone at this table is working from the same facts." Marcus's girlfriend, a woman named Priya who had only met me twice, looked at Marcus. He didn't look back at her. "The money from the trust will be transferred to my account next week. That is handled. I'm not here about the money." "Then why are you here?" my mother asked. Her voice was careful. "Because she knew you might do this. Your mother, my grandmother. She loved you enough to prepare for it. And I thought you should know that she saw you clearly, and she chose me anyway." No one spoke. I could hear the furnace running. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pot was still simmering. I stood up, I picked up the letter, I put it back in my bag. "She chose all of us," I said. "She just made sure I had what I needed to stand on." Priya looked down at her plate. Marcus put both hands flat on the table, the same way I had 18 months ago when he'd told me I would be fine. I wondered if he noticed. My father called me 4 days later. He spoke for 11 minutes. He used phrases like, "We thought we were doing what was best," and "Marcus was in a difficult place." He did not say, "We were wrong," but he did say, near the end, "I miss you, Clara." That was not nothing. I wrote it down. My mother did not call for 2 weeks. When she did, she cried. I let her. I didn't fill the silence the way I used to. I let it sit there, the full weight of it, until she said, "I don't know how to fix this." And I told her, "I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm asking you to be honest about what happened." She said she would try. I said that was a start. Marcus did not call. His girlfriend Priya, however, sent me a text 3 days after the dinner. It said only, "For what it's worth, I believe you." I sat with that for a long time. I hadn't expected it. I still think about it. The money from the trust came through on a Thursday, 8 days after that dinner. I deposited it without ceremony. I did not tell anyone. It was not a victory to celebrate. It was a correction, a thing being put back where it belonged. I set terms, quietly, for what a relationship with my family would now look like. Honesty first. No more decisions made about me, without me, under the assumption that I would simply absorb them. I did not deliver this as a speech. I told my father plainly in a phone call. He listened. He said, "That's fair." Whether that holds, I genuinely don't know yet. Some things didn't change. The dining room table is still the same table. My mother still makes tea when she's nervous. Marcus still fills a room. Some things did. I now sit at that table differently, more still. On a Sunday in March, I made breakfast in my apartment. Scrambled eggs, coffee, the particular gray light that comes through a Portland window in early spring. Dara was staying the weekend. She was still asleep. Nate had texted to ask if I was working the following shift. I wasn't. I was here. Just here. The table had 2 place settings. Not 4, not 6, 2. I thought about my grandmother, about her cold, small hands and the cedar smell of her, and the fact that she had sat somewhere 6 months before she died and written a letter she hoped I would find. She hadn't been bitter when she wrote it. I know that from the tone. It was careful, methodical, and at the very end she had written, "You don't need this money, my love, but you deserve to have what was meant for you." I am not healed from this. I don't think that's the right word. I am not at war with my family, but I am not pretending the war didn't happen. There is a version of my mother and father who I love, and a version of events that I know is true, and I am learning to hold both without needing them to collapse into one. Dara appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair unorganized, squinting. "Is there coffee?" she said. "Yes," I said. She sat down across from me. We didn't talk about my family. We talked about her case, my next shift, whether the plant on the windowsill needed more light. The chair across from me was filled. That was enough. What my grandmother understood, what I am still learning, is that love without documentation is not enough. Not because love is insufficient, but because the people who take from you rarely announce their intentions. They rely on your trust, your patience, your long-practiced habit of absorbing things quietly and moving on. If you're watching this and you recognize the shape of this story, the invisible child, the redirected inheritance, the family that assumes you'll be fine, I want you to hear this. Being capable of surviving something is not the same as consenting to it. My grandmother didn't leave me a letter because she doubted my strength. She left it because she knew that strength without evidence is just a story you tell yourself alone. She gave me the evidence. Leave a comment. Tell me, what would you have done at that dinner table? Would you have walked in, or would you have cashed the check and disappeared? And if this story felt like something you needed to hear today, there are more stories like this one here on Hidden Life Files. Come back. You're not as alone in this as you think. The will said equal. She made sure of it. That's not revenge. That's architecture.